introduction to all right. So today's presentation will support our continuing discussion about data tracking, safety, and insurability solutions. I am very happy to introduce Alistair Blundy. He's the founder and CEO of Skyrisks. Skyrisks is a new entity based in the United Kingdom. It's focusing on insurance solutions for the advanced air mobility sector. However, Alistair is by no means new to aviation or even specialty aviation. That's been his focus as a special aviation underwriter, and he's got expertise that he'll be applying at Skyrisks in creating pricing models built on data aggregation and analysis. So things that we're already working on. It'll help us to give us some guidance about the types of data that we need to be tracking and how do we all continue our collective move forward on safety. So with that, Alistair, I'd like to hand things off to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is obviously a group where there is world-class expertise and friendly faces, and it's wonderful to be here to talk about insurance. I guess what most of us, all of us have in common is that we're convinced that the urban air mobility, advanced air mobility future, and that's wide into hydrogen technologies, but the future of aviation is going to be a little bit different to what we've seen before. And we hear a lot of skepticism across the world when we speak about these technologies. I'm sure you've all experienced that when you speak to your friends and family, a lot of skepticism. But what we have in common here, I suppose, is that we know that it is going to be successful and it will be adopted. The conversation around insurance maybe lags behind a little bit because people are totally focused on producing safe and certifiable aircraft, which is understandable. We sort of get that. But from an insurance point of view, we're aware that the insurance piece is going to be a crucial part of the puzzle for the successful adoption of advanced air mobility. So that's really what I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about, and to introduce Skyrisks, which we're really excited about, which is the brand new company focused on providing insurance solutions for advanced air mobility, this whole ecosystem. So I'm going to share a presentation that we've got here. It's a few slides. Can you see that? Fantastic. Welcome. Right. Insurance that enables AAM growth. This is all I'm going to do. I'm going to introduce Skyrisks and then give a very, very brief overview of how the insurance market is structured. Some of us will probably know this already, but I'll just go through that anyway. Then how the insurance market is thinking about supporting the AAM revolution and the adoption of these new aircraft technologies. And then two very brief recommendations on how we can be doing something now in the lead up to entry into service, aircraft deliveries, widespread adoption of advanced air mobility technologies. So that's where we're going, and it won't take too long. Introducing Skyrisks. Skyrisks was founded in London this year with the sole focus of building a new technology-driven insurance solution for advanced air mobility. We're here to serve not just operators or aircraft manufacturers, but the ecosystem itself of advanced air mobility, the support industry, the vertiport industry. There are lots of ancillary industries that are having to set up around the operation of advanced air mobility aircraft. So we're here to look at the risks involved with the whole ecosystem, not just a little part of it. We're based in London, near the Lloyd's market. So we're right in EC3 in London. And we have set up specifically to focus on advanced air mobility. So we're not intending to do conventional aviation risks, but specifically advanced air mobility. And that gives us the freedom to focus on building something that's really going to work for the new aspects of the risk, which we're all talking about. And we've been talking about on forums like this for quite a while now, how these aircraft are going to present us with new challenges that are not impossible to overcome, but we need to give them serious thought, particularly from an insurance point of view. Because when and if things go wrong, insurance is critical, and how we respond is critical, and the insurance that we have in place is critical. So that's what Skyrisks is. It's built on these four pillars at the bottom: having underwriting talent, having the technology so that we can provide an insurance solution that's slick and that isn't a fork in the road, but is a slick process. Market access, so we're based right in central London. Does somebody go on mute?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much. No, we're based right in the heart of London insurance market. And then this fourth thing I'm very passionate about. I don't think it's possible to consider and underwrite, and provide an insurance solution for advanced air mobility technologies without having a serious, deep understanding of the regulatory and engineering challenges that the industry is facing. And I think maybe in insurance, sometimes we view ourselves wrongly as taking a bit of a back seat from the industry, so that we're a financial product that sits somewhere else in the world and we provide a piece of paper, when really insurance is a lot more than that and provides a lot more value than that. But in order to provide that value, we have to understand the challenges that the industry is facing. So at Skyrisks, we're very interested in talking to aircraft engineers, and that's what we've been doing over the last few weeks and months, and the regulators, and understanding how new pilots are going to be trained, all the sorts of conversations that have been discussed in this working group, which have been super interesting. So that's what Skyrisks is. Really, really excited to say that we're here to be working with you over the coming years. The insurance market, the London subscription market. The word subscription, so subscribe, write under, underwrite, all the same word, all the same idea. Started when insurance contracts for ships would be signed at the bottom of the piece of paper under the name of the ship by the underwriters. And in the event of a loss at sea, those names would then be looked at and the piece of paper would be carried around the market physically to collect the insurance money. So that's why underwriters are called underwriters. And the reason we need a subscription market in London is because the risks are too large for one insurer to accept. So the insured on the left gains access to the London market insurers through a broker, and then depending on local regulations, may need an intermediary in the middle. And then the insurers in London will provide a insurance cover that takes account for the whole risk on a subscription basis. So you get full insurance cover, but you'd have multiple insurers potentially on your insurance placement. And so our job is to deal with the broker. And I think one of the fantastic things about the London insurance market, and I think it's quite unique, is that the brokers and the insurers are within walking distance of each other, which is why we have a bit of a reputation of doing a lot of face-to-face interaction and knowing each other very well. And the reason why that's so good for the end client is because you know that when your insurance is being placed, you have personal physical representation in front of the insurer. And that means that we can have a much better understanding of the risk, and we can provide an insurance product that is tailored and bespoke to the risk, because we have that face-to-face interaction and things don't get lost in emails or long slide decks, and we can have conversations in person. That's the London insurance market. There's the insurance cycle, and this is the track and flow of available insurance capacity in London, along with the pricing of insurance and claims volatility over the years. And really, it's just a visual representation of pure supply and demand economics. That's all this is really. So you get lots of supply of capital into the insurance market. So lots of people want to insure a certain segment of business, or just put their money in insurance because it's an attractive opportunity for making a return on investment. Rates fall. Insurers chase their market share, so prices need to go down or coverage needs to expand. Rates go into free fall even further. Insurers start to make loss, so rates start to rise again. There are more large events and poor investment returns. Now we're down at the orange at the bottom. Market capacity is eroded. There's just not enough market capacity, not enough insurers willing to insure. They're very selective on their risks. And therefore that leads to the rise in prices again, which then makes the insurance market attractive once again for new entrants, and the cycle continues. So we all learned that in economics in school. It's pure supply and demand economics. In insurance, it is affected by market events that come along that people may have not expected, either in their nature or their magnitude. So in recent years, we'll all be aware of what's happened with the 737 and with Russia and Ukraine and with the pandemic. The pandemic's been particularly effective in the entertainment and contingency market, where thousands of events had to be cancelled, and event cancellation policies paid out a lot of money for that. But that's the London insurance market. Just a brief overview. The aviation market tends to be split into three. You could add space on the end. Airline insurance, aerospace insurance, which is also known as products and airports, and general aviation insurance. Airline insurance, scheduled flights, generally more than 50 seats. and get all the covers that they need to run the airline, and they're listed in that box on the left. The aerospace market in the middle, which is sometimes described as everything in the aviation industry that doesn't fly. So the aircraft manufacturers make things that fly, but they don't themselves fly. Refuelers are the same, caterers, airports, maintenance operations, people that provide ancillary services at airports. All of those sort of risks are in the aerospace market. And then general aviation, very similar to airlines in coverage, unscheduled operations, generally fleets of aircraft, generally fewer than 50 seats. That's the structure of the aviation insurance market. And here's really my sort of main message that I wanted to give on this presentation today, is that I think we all agree with the sentence on the left that insurance is critical to AAM adoption. We obviously can't do this without the support of the insurance market and the understanding of the insurance market. But I wanted to add to that the fact that on the right, insurance can accelerate AAM adoption. I think it's clear that we can utilize insurance, we can leverage insurance offerings to accelerate the adoption of AAM in the world. And I'm quite excited about that. But first, it's critical to AAM adoption. Of course, without insurance, you can't really move. You can't get out of bed. You can't do anything in business. So the freedom to innovate given by insurers means that we can build these aircraft in the first place and test them and build them. Public acceptance. People aren't going to want to get on aircraft that aren't insured by underwriters that really understand them and have provided an insurance solution that is going to respond effectively in the event of a loss, of an accident. Regulatory confidence. I'm sure the regulators are asking all the time, what is the insurance offering? What insurance are you going to get? What are the limits required? Where are they going to come from? How stable is the insurance offering? All those sorts of questions. So we can be there to give the regulators confidence that there is going to be adequate insurance cover for advanced air mobility. Accessibility and cost. If insurance comes into this conversation about AAM too late, the prices, of course, would just be sky high, because underwriters will have to be very prudent and assume a lot of things that they might not necessarily have to assume. So insurance being in the picture early can ensure that the operations themselves, when they get commercial, are accessible and cost effective. So on the right, how can we actually leverage insurance to accelerate the adoption of AAM? Well, insurance can help prevent accidents in the future. Insurers sitting in London have sight of lots and lots of different risks happening globally, lots of different use cases, different sorts of aircraft. And then all of the lost data that we have in the insurance market of the last 100 years of aviation. And of course, there are lots of similar threads and lost trends that we can identify. And insurers will be able to look at AAM and make insights based on what we see in the emerging initial commercial operations that we see in AAM. So we can help prevent accidents, which is obviously key for the AAM industry, because it's one of the huge threats, I'd say, to the AAM industry, that a high-profile loss is on the front page of the newspaper early doors, but we can prevent that. Easy to find cover. What we don't want is for our extremely innovative aircraft operators and OEMs, these manufacturers of aircraft, we don't want them scrabbling around the world trying to find adequate insurance cover at the last minute and not sure if they're going to get it, and then having to buy something that's not really tailored to their risk. So we need to make it easy for them to find cover. The easier they can do that, the quicker they can enter into service, and the quicker they can have confidence to start there and scale up their commercial operations. Insurance can support that variety of use cases. People are talking about all sorts of use cases in advanced air mobility, and initially we're focusing on maybe 2 or 3 of them. And yet we really believe in the wide spread of use cases for these new capable aircraft. And so insurance can be there to support that variety of use cases. This is an interesting one. Integrated aviation companies. What do you do when you have the manufacturer operating the aircraft and doing the maintenance? The insurance policy needs to be able to cater for that. And then the next step is, what if the insurance policy is built into their core company system? so that they don't even really have to think about their insurance. The insurance itself can be integrated into the aviation company. We were talking about Part 103, obviously this group is sort of focused on these sport aircraft in the light category. I thought this was particularly relevant for aircraft in that category, because you may not have much oversight on how people are flying these things. So if you're implementing aerotelematics and you're leveraging usage-based insurance, I mean, Danny Mako's on this group, and he's one of the brightest people I've spoken to about UBI and aerotelematics. It's amazing talking to him. If we can utilize UBI and aerotelematics, we can get a great idea of how people are flying these aircraft to begin with, make it accessible so that they can buy coverage, and then make it possible for people to buy them. Because if the insurance is too expensive, I think it will be hard to sell some of these light aircraft if insurance is a really high proportion of the cost of buying and operating the aircraft. And then the blue box at the bottom, accident response. One of the insurance market's best skills in the aviation world is to be that first responder and to put the pieces back together after an aviation incident. And heaven forbid, if in the next few years there is an accident, the insurance market are going to be the people responding and making sure that there is indemnity for those that have suffered a loss and to put us back on our feet. So what can we be doing now? I've just got 1 minute left. The focus of the advanced air mobility industry is super clear. It's entry into service. When can we build and certify these safe aircraft and enter them into service? And so the question I keep hearing is, when should we begin to engage with the insurance market? The focus of insurers is actually, in my space, to support the safe and sustainable future of aviation. I'm excited about this technology and we want to support it. And we want to deliver these insurance solutions that can accelerate the adoption of advanced air mobility. And therefore, it's quite clear what I think we need to do is to start that conversation now. And I know it's already happening, which is great. I mean, I'm here, so that's fantastic. But to keep having this conversation and have positive partnerships, viewing insurers as people that really actually want to help. We want to help by understanding the engineering and regulatory challenges at a deep level so that we can support entry into service with our insurance solutions. And then just something on the data. There is such a big conversation to be had around data within AAM, new sources of data, new aviation company models in their structure, new risk factors, of course, with the aircraft and how they're flown, how pilots are trained, where they land, all of those sort of risk factors. And then a new approach to usage-based insurance in advanced air mobility that we haven't necessarily seen before in the conventional aviation market. Well, what data will be available, who will want to access it, where are new insights going to come from? I think the big question that I'd really like to speak to people about is what data needs to be available and then how can we get it? And I think to have that conversation, we need to be there with the manufacturers, of course, but then recently we are seeing more and more of a move towards collaborating with established avionics providers, which may make it slightly easier to have a collaborative approach when it comes to the data, so that the whole advanced air mobility ecosystem thinks, actually, we are going to have a more transparent approach to our data so that we can share it with our key stakeholders, including insurers, and then they can make their risk analysis on the data that we can provide. And then insurance can be available and bespoke and do what it needs to do so that we can enter into service and operate and scale up advanced air mobility operations. I might just send something later about deep uncertainty, because I think I've gone on for 21 minutes. But we've been doing some work with the City of London University about this idea of deep uncertainty, which is a technical term. And it's where you're putting up a plan where it's impossible to predict some aspects of what you're going into. So we're working with the aviation department there, and I'm happy to send something around afterwards, but I don't think I'll go through this now. Thank you so much, Andy, for inviting me. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you for being here. And I am curious about deep uncertainty, and that looks like a whole other very interesting topic. So we had a couple good questions in the chat. Tony, would you like to ask the question? Yeah.
Alistair, thank you so much for sharing. We've heard a lot of different insurance people share over the past couple of months on this specific group, and I find it really interesting as an aviator. So I'm just going to come out and ask the very basic question. In general aviation, if I look at my particular fleet right now, which is a bunch of premier jets that are valued, I don't know, somewhere under 3 million, we look at what the price is of our increase in our aviation insurance every year, and it's getting to the point where it's almost debilitating in some operations. So I worry so much about that as we're really exploring this new industry and we're talking about these numbers that sometimes seem unattainable in AAM, but we know we're going to get there. So what is the aviation insurance industry doing to be able to offset that? Obviously, we know that those type of insurance numbers are not going to make for a profitable company with AAM. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. I'm sure you guys are talking about this behind the scenes.
We're very well aware that AAM insurance companies are going to have to be able to afford the insurance. I think we're all aware of that. And that's why I think I'm focusing here on the transparency of the data so that we can take a real in-depth view at the advanced air mobility operations and not have to make all of the assumptions and inherit those assumptions from the other business that we underwrite. So the more data we have, the more we're able to say, okay, we're not going to make those assumptions. We can use the data available and we can make new assumptions. The 20% that's in your question, I mean, part of that is driven by the whole of the market as a force together, driven by unprofitability and lack of capacity in the market, which is not something that sort of advanced air mobility as a pocket within aviation can really do anything about. But I understand the issue. And I think we are in a good place to think about advanced air mobility as its own subsegment that requires special attention within the aviation market, rather than lumping it in with everything else. I think it's too special for that. It's too different.
I like your response. Thank you very much for that. And I do want you to know that every single project I'm working on, whether it's drones, advanced air mobility, consulting, everybody's talking about making sure that we can get the data to the proper regulators and the proper people that need to be able to process that in order to get us the solution. So you have our support.
Thank you. That's great to hear.
Thanks, Tony. Great question. And you're right about the data, and I want to circle back on that. Danny, you had a question about chronology. Do you want to voice that?
Yes. Alistair, great presentation, and thanks for the call out. I had a question about, as you see AAM and their different use cases starting to roll out, can you talk a little bit about the sequence in which you think the first areas of insurability and where the first demand will be, and then subsequent products that you think will, as these entities become operational, subsequent products will both become available and or dependencies that you have on making those types of products available?
That's a great question. Initially, the need for insurance within advanced air mobility is mainly related to products liability. I'm aware of some component part manufacturers that are already buying products liability insurances in the London market. And so that's needed now. So we're here for that. And then initially, as aircraft enter into service, they're obviously going to need their fleet handler liability policies as they begin to operate. It's an interesting question around how those insurances will need to adapt and be different as advanced air mobility scales up. There's a particular need potentially in urban environments for a different approach to thinking about insurance in terms of the proximity to buildings and the different flight routes. And Danny, it's great that you asked that question, because aerotelematics in UBI is absolutely key in building out that sort of insurance solution. You can't just put conditions in a policy, because then if they're not met and there is an accident, the insurance cover is jeopardized in that case. So I think that's a great question. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, Danny? I'm sure you do.
Well, I both from a signal perspective and an intuitive perspective, I think you're absolutely right. Both from a preparation for operations perspective, there are insurers that are more familiar with and ready to provide insurance around general aviation infrastructure, that type of thing. And certainly before any of these anticipated launches occur in 2025, they've got have to have some place to take off from. And so those things have to be built out and insured. I think also there will be fundamental elements related to basic operations, insurance related to lithium-ion batteries, the basic components that probably will have the highest demand. And then as time goes on and more data, actual operational data is collected, both that will enable additional products, but also the refinement on the premiums related to those products. So I think that that's probably the sequence that I would envision.
Yeah, totally on board with that. I see that.
Any other questions? I have one, but I wanted to put it out to the floor first.
Hey, Andrew, this is Johnny Do. Before you ask yours, can I ask one?
Please do, Johnny.
A question. Is it much different marketplace and the requirement for public service operation insurance coverage, like firefighting, emergency first responder, etc., compared that use cases versus commercial or personal use? Is the insurance landscape much different?
Thank you for the question. It's all to do with the exposure for those operations. So in the event of firefighting, we may have to be landing in an area which is very exposed from an insurance point of view. So from that point of view, the insurance is very different. In terms of the coverage, I can see in the next few years there being a need for insurance that is clever enough to know when potentially the aircraft is on a segment of its journey where it's potentially unmanned, and then a pilot gets on board and does the next bit. Well, I think we can see that happening, particularly within firefighting and emergency response, where the operations or missions are very dangerous and where we're dealing with aircraft that are capable of flying both fully autonomously, remotely piloted, or with a pilot on board. So those are two aspects which might make a need for different levels of insurance coverage.
I understand. Thank you.
Scott, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a question. If you could comment on capacity, hull, and liability that you guys are able to write, or maybe going to be looking to write.
Yeah, I think we're certainly looking to write an insurance line that's not inadequate. So it's a significant line, so that when operations need their liability cover, Skyrisks is not here to write a very small proportion of that. We're here to lead that insurance policy and write a significant share. I can't quite share just yet what our capacity is, but that is all going to be published on our website and published in a press release quite soon. But we're not quite yet at the stage where I can share that because we're still figuring it out.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Alistair, I'll lob one at you. You and I touched on when we spoke before about training standards and the data set that we'll want the aircraft to be tracking. How should we think about collectively agreeing upon what the data set looks like and what the training standards should look like, so that the manufacturers are all on the same page with the insurers and the underwriters?
Yes, spoke a couple of months ago to CAE, and they are speaking to the regulators. I think this is so smart. This is a real smart move about training of pilots being more competency based than it has been before. And with the more sophisticated training technology that is being developed at the moment, it will be possible to assess the competency of the pilot during training and then adapt training to build up the levels of competency that are lacking more than others. And insurers would be very interested in knowing how that landscape of pilot competency following that training is graded. So whether that's a single grading or whether it's a report that you get, I don't know what the structure would be, but certainly more sophisticated than what are your hours? What are your type ratings?
That makes sense. And then with respect to the data,
I,
there's so much
sorry,
we could
could
potentially
I-
be tracking. How do we think about what that data set should look like? There's, you know, these aircraft are just going to offload terabytes of information, which is good, but there'll be critical bits that we want to track for safety and for and for the, you know, the comfort of the insuring underwriters.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Well, we all know when you choose to include, you choose to exclude. And the big lesson, I think, from Danny Mako and UBI is that one of the highest correlations with motor insurance was credit score, which had nothing to do with driving. So as we figure out which data we want to ingest, I would think we want to be really careful about leaving out things that we don't think are going to be relevant. There are some things that we all know that are probably going to be relevant, like battery capacity. How low do we get? Like the angle of the aircraft when it's operating outside of its expected envelope, those sorts of things. But there'll be lots of other data points, you're right, that we can get in this new space that we can then run some models on and see where the correlations are. So we're quite excited to do that. But to do that, we need to have quite a transparent approach to getting the data and not to exclude things unnecessarily.
Yep, makes sense. And Suzanne, apologies, I think I stepped on your question you were starting to ask.
Yeah, sorry. I was into Alistair. He answered a bit that when you choose, you exclude as well. And I was just wanting to make the point, which the learning we have from the self-driving car development, that the data was discriminatory. Of course, a self-driving car which have to avoid people is different than an eVTOL who is, it's more technical issues, but we might just as well get it right from the beginning.
Yes, I agree. It's a great opportunity to start with a blank piece of paper and get those things right. Totally agree with you, Suzanne.
Well put. We have time for one more question if there's any others. Last call.
Maybe I would just, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, all you, Danny.
Well, I'm super excited, Alistair, about your new venture, and I was wondering if there are any ways in which this group can help you. What do you need from the industry to be able to do what you do?
I think the first thing is this understanding more and more and more of the engineering and the regulatory challenges and the other challenges that are being faced by the industry. We really like talking about that. So if anyone on this call wants to have a separate call with me and discuss technical aspects, we really appreciate doing that. And then the second way that you can help is joining this conversation around the approach to data. Where are we going to get the data from? How is it going to be structured? Who's going to collect it? How is it going to be used? Where are we nervous about sharing data? Any insights on that? Any progress towards getting to a point where we have this ideal utopia with data and advanced air mobility, where it's all transparent, everybody gets what they need, and we can make brilliant insights and avoid accidents and increase safety. That's where we want to be. And so we need to be aware of that when we're building the aircraft. And I'm sure some of us are in technical jobs in the industry and we're engineering things, just to have that in our minds as we're building out this technology. Thank you, Danny.
Perfect. Well said. Thank you. Well, Alistair, thank you so much for being here. This is just right in line with the things we've been talking about, and we really appreciate the work that you're doing, and we're glad that you're here. So thank you for being in this space.
Thanks, Andy.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm going to post some information about some events upcoming. I wanted to talk about Oshkosh. I'm going to go to Wisconsin a week from tomorrow. I think Danny's going to be there. Is that right, Danny? And we've got the Vertical Flight Society Electric Aircraft Symposium, which is going to be a great event. Take a look at that one if you're not already going. Is anybody else planning to be out at Oshkosh or at the Electric Aircraft Symposium?
Yeah, I hope to be there in San Francisco. Yeah.
Good. Good. So one of the interesting things about Oshkosh is that the FAA usually speaks there. They spoke last year, and the original plan was for them to have some notes to us in the industry about their Mosaic initiative, which will in the States will touch on reformations and updates to the light sport aircraft category, among others. I just wanted to open the floor to talk about Mosaic. If people have thoughts about that, if we have any information. I think a lot of people in this industry are just kind of hanging on what the FAA is going to do next, but any thoughts or discussion about that?
That's a great question, Andrew. If
Yeah.
anybody does have information on that, we have some of our, OEMs that are starting to come forward now that are using that process, and I'd love personally to familiarize myself with it if anyone has details to share on that with the group at some point here.
So one thing that I kind of looked into this, and the FAA does their presentation at Oshkosh on the Thursday of Oshkosh. So that'll be the 27th of July. And I looked on the schedule for the event, and there is a Meet the Administrator event at 11:30 a.m. on Thursday. So if you're going to be out there, that'll be a good one to attend. It's at the Theater in the Woods, which is just this big sort of outdoor amphitheater. But when they spoke last year, they were kind of supposed to have these updates done last year. They punted it to this year and said it would be done by August, which we'll have to see. They've had personnel changes at FAA, and they have a lot on their plate, I know, but I'm really interested to see what comes next. They did put out some notes on updates to powered lift aircraft. So how that training should look. And the idea was that for powered lift aircraft, they were recommending a type certificate. So normally a type certification is required of a pilot for any aircraft 12,500 pounds or over. So it's not all aircraft, it's larger, heavier aircraft, but due to the complexity, they're recommending that pilots of powered lift aircraft like Joby, for example, those operators would have a type certificate. That's one note that's come out. I know we're interested in waiting on others as well. Any other comments on that topic before I choke?
Yeah, this is Carl Dietrich with Jump Arrow. I've got some additional notes on the SFAR, if that would be helpful. Please.
Thank you, Carl.
Sure, yeah. So in addition to the type rating that you mentioned, effectively the FAA seems to be wanting to necessitate a new category, powered lift category, which has certain number hour requirements on top of the type rating. And there are a number of challenges that the SFAR is out for comment, and I would encourage everybody in this group to consider commenting on the SFAR. The General Aviation Manufacturers Association is planning on submitting a comment on behalf of member OEMs, and the big issue that was raised in the Gamma meetings that I attended is the use of the creation of effectively that category when there's no standardization on the human interface. As I'm sure many of the folks in this group know, that you can come up with lots of different types of human interfaces for safe eVTOLs. Doesn't change the safety of them, but because there's such a wide disparity in different types of human interfaces, the creation of a category, in my opinion, and the opinion of many folks in the room, the creation of a category rating does. The requirement of the type rating interfaces on all of these aircraft tend to be specific training for each eVTOL aircraft, but the creation of a category and the category requirements in particular doesn't really make sense. In addition, the FAA flight standards folks seem to be continuing to think of a particular number of hours requirements instead of what's probably more appropriate for these types of aircraft, which would be operations. In other words, takeoffs and landings, as those tend to be the higher risk phases of flight. And frankly, it's challenging to build up large numbers of hours in all electric aircraft. When, again, for safety purposes, it's going to be the operations that are going to drive safety, not as much the hours. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be any hour requirements, but that should not be the focus, as it tends to be traditionally in coming from the traditional flight standards mindset. So anyway, I'm interjecting a little bit of my own opinions here, but I would encourage folks to at least read a summary of the SFAR. The SFAR itself is 529 pages, so it's a bit of a slog to get through, but please do take a look at it. It is very important to the evolution of the industry that we get a reasonable and rational and safety-focused rule, even if it's a temporary rule, which this SFAR will be, to facilitate entry into service. So yeah, I encourage everybody to take a deep dive if they can. Thank you.
Excellent notes, Carl. Thank you. And to the extent you're interested in dropping a link into the chat, please do, and that'll allow us to jump in that way. But
yeah, I'm sorry,
yeah.
I'm driving and I was dropping off my kids during this meeting, so I couldn't chime in, but I just dropped them off, so I'm not in a position to drop a link, but hopefully somebody else can. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Perfect. No, thank you very much. And comments or follow-up? Okay, that's great. So I'll pivot then to some conversation about our white paper. So Dr. Pavel's made some great strides, and we've got pages and pages of excellent content. In the chat, I've dropped in our microsite where you can see the previous presentations, and then the working group folder where you can see where we are in the white paper. I've created an updated outline, so it's version 1.4 to kind of strengthen and add to the safety components that we can work on. So take a look at that. If you're interested in being a contributor, we could use all the help we can get. And there's a sign up spreadsheet where you can add your name to a section or sections that you're interested in working on. And the idea is that we've got an event coming up in about 6 months, the eVTOL symposium that the Vertical Flight Society is putting on is February 6 to 8 in Santa Clara, California, which is in the Bay Area. And that will be a great place for us to present the paper. And it gives us enough time to do work on it. We can submit the abstract anytime this month, which I'm planning to do. And I just wanted to put that out there, ask for ideas about the white paper, or if people have questions or contributions that they'd like to add. The idea is that this will be a good way for us to have conversations about safety, about the integration of the light recreational private aircraft, and build in, for the benefit of the industry, what are our recommendations about the rollout, safety, training, things like that. It's important to have a unified voice and to be able to make these recommendations to industry. And also, for those of us that participate, it's a great opportunity to get published in a paper that can do a lot of good for the space. So I'd recommend getting involved if you've got a little bit of time to contribute. Okay. So what I might do on the white paper is maybe set up some subgroups or sub meetings that are sort of 2 weeks offset from these monthly meetings, and it'll allow us to focus a little bit more on the paper. If you're interested in that, feel free to shoot me an email. And Danny Mecco, you had you've been a great user of the Vertical Flight Society forum, and I wanted to ask if you could talk about that for a minute, because to be honest, I haven't been much of a user. You brought it to my attention, and it's kind of there. I didn't know about it, and it's this great resource, and you've been taking advantage better than anybody. So could you just give us a briefing on that and how we might be able to use that more effectively?
Sure, sure. So many of you may know that there is a discussion forum. It's called VFS Hover, where people are able to post, questions and comments and notifications, etc. So what Andy and I were thinking about is we decided to post information related to these sessions on that board, both for greater visibility, but also I found that I think in these conversations, there's a lot of questions that people might have that there's not enough time to get to. There may be comments and such. And so that bulletin board or that forum is a great venue for doing that. So if you are already a VFS member, if you go to that link, and Andy and I will resend out the link, to the form, you just use your password, your credentials that you use for anything, everything else that's VFS. There's going to be a section that's specifically eVTOL that will send you a link to and redirect you to. And also, it's clear that there are some people, some of the presenters particularly, that won't necessarily be members, but Andy and I can help facilitate getting the questions out, getting answers, and getting back on the bulletin board. And I think it kind of helps build this community, provide great visibility to the work and the sessions that are going on. It may also draw in more people that are interested in being involved.
Fantastic. That's great, Danny. So Mike Hirschberg chimed in that we have a community group that we can use to drop our notes into, and it's entitled Electric VTOL. So there are subgroups. There's about 6,000 plus members of Vertical Flight Society. So we don't necessarily want to broadcast to all of them all the time, but our group is Electric VTOL. So we can look for that one and post within that group. And then there's threads. So we'll be able to put in one link and then, kind of attach notes and questions and ideas to that one. Is that right, Danny? Okay, perfect.
Absolutely right.
Good. That is what I have for my notes for today. Other comments, questions, ideas? What are people excited about? What's going on in your world that we should know about that's kind of something cool that you're about to announce, about to do, something you're going to fly? I'm excited to go to Oshkosh. Oh yeah. Dom, did you have a question, or were you just scratching your nose?
Excited. I'm getting good data from flights now over SD card. I put on inside Arduino. So this gives me good feedback to improve next transitions.
That's perfect. Data collection is going to be important, and getting our head around what we need to collect in a unified format is going to be super helpful. Any other positive notes? Events we should know about, things going on in the near future?
We can plug the FAA drone and AAM symposium that's going on in Baltimore. I think that's the 1st through the 3rd. I think that should be a nice wealth of information. There should be people from that interagency working group there, and hopefully be able to pull some clarity out of some of these topics. I think it's in Baltimore. Don't quote me.
It is in Baltimore. You're right. That's a great one. Are you going to go, Tony?
Yes, we'll be there. Our teams will be.
That's great.
But looking forward to the information get out of that one. I do have another information. On the 20th, next coming Thursday, we have again, the working group meeting, coordinated by Working Group 4, but it's invited for everyone. For one thing, we're going to introduce our new co-lead, and I'll keep a secret right now. Some of them you already probably heard the wind about who that is going to be for the working group 4, but also the other the guest speaker will be very interesting from the Textron eAviation. We are going to get some interesting updates on what the eAviation several project is about, including the previous Bell eVTOL project is now moved over to eAviation. So we'll send out the meeting invites, and everybody please join us if you can. It's coming Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So it would be 11 at Pacific. So watch out for the meeting notice. Thank you.
Outstanding. That'll be a good one. That'll be a good one. Anyone else? Events, comments, new developments, concerns, hysteria? Okay, I'm glad there's no hysteria. So, Johnny, we're going to look forward to that meeting next week of working group number 4. I intend to be there with the whole gang. That'll be a lot of fun. And Tony, I hope you can take some notes on the FAA event. That's going to be a great one, and we'd love to hear. You know, if you're able to jump in on next month's meeting, we'd love to hear about that and how it went and any takeaways that you pulled out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What the FAA is up to is sort of on everybody's mind, and it's. I think that's what we're all thinking about, or it's certainly the manufacturers are. Is, you know, what's going to happen next? It feels like we kind of want that shoe to go ahead and drop so we can understand what to do about it. Good. Other questions or comments before we go on our way? I thank you everyone for being here, particularly Alistair. Wonderful presentation. Thanks for all the work that you're doing. And we're looking forward to keeping track of what you're up to and hopefully working with you and your team. For next month's meeting, I'm working on a safety conversation. So we'll kind of piggyback off of this a little bit and work on how training can look and what we can do about unifying training and what are the, solidifying what are the important aspects of training, such as what Carl had talked about. How do we balance time versus operations, things like that. Let's keep that conversation going. That's an important one. Okay, I'll let everyone go. Thank you so much for being here. Great meeting today. I really appreciate your excellent conversation and input.